Welcome once again to the front porch for another episode of Monday Meditations. Grab your Bibles, open to Proverbs chapter 23. Today we're going to be looking at verses 1 through 12 and focusing on living the life that God wants us to live, which is a disciplined life. And the Proverbs writer would do this over and over again with these short, pithy statements. That's what a proverb usually means, but it's profound in the sense that it is inspired of God, and God's wanting what's best for His creation, including a father passing on advice to his son. And get to the point of the matter, there's a right way to live and there's a wrong way to live. And He wants us to grow into the life that God has created for us and to be what He would have us to be, fearing Him and keeping His commandments, as we've said many times, which is the whole of man. And this disciplined life is seen again in this context, warning about certain scenarios that might come up in your life. To be prepared for those things, to think ahead of time instead of having to react in just the moment. And sometimes those reactions in the moment can lead us down a wrong path. So let's go ahead and dig into and meditate upon Proverbs 23, verses 1 through 12. Verse 1 says, "When thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee, and put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite. Be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat." So verses 1 through 3 is setting a scene. You're invited to eat with someone of great importance, a ruler. He says, consider very carefully what's put before you. Often the idea is seen in the book of Proverbs of belittling, and not belittling, but more so correcting this attitude of not being lazy and looking down upon those who are slothful and lazy because they're taking advantage of life and they're not living up to their potential. And sometimes we might get the idea that He's elevating the wealthy, that the rich are better off than those who are lazy. Well, it depends, and we'll see that a little bit more in what we're talking about. Every individual needs to be judged on an individual basis of what can happen as you look at these situations. So you consider diligently what's before you. Don't get caught up in the pomp and circumstance. It could be that this person is putting something before you to get something out of you. He's trying to entice you. He says, put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite. What does he mean by that? It's kind of the same idea that we get in bite your tongue. It's a statement that's made in the sense of checking yourself here. Hold yourself back. If you're given to appetite, that could be a gluttonous situation, but more so if you're tempted by these dainties, if you're tempted by these delicacies, if you will, be careful of that. And see, verse 3 again, he says, be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat. It's something put before you to entice you, to bring you along, to maybe cause you to envy what he has or be desirous to have what he has. And he says, if you'll do what I say, you can have this too. One of those concepts, it kind of reminds me of Daniel chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. How Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, the choice Hebrews, were brought into Nebuchadnezzar's court. They're going to be trained. They're going to be prepared to serve in his court. And he puts before them all the king's meat and all the king's drink. And you remember in verse 8, Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the king's meat and the king's drink, the dainties, the delicacies that were put before him. That didn't appeal to him. Give me beans and water and watch for 10 days and see, he would say, if we're not better off, if this is better for us. And the end was true because he wasn't going to defile himself. But listen again to that concept in Daniel 1:8. He purposed in his heart. That's what the wise man is trying to convince his son, trying to convince you and I as we read the Proverbs letter. Prepare yourself beforehand. Purpose in your heart not to defile yourself, that you're not going to give in to those temptations. You're not going to be swayed by the delicacies of this world, whatever they may be, whether you're talking about food or you're talking about riches, clothing, positions, fame, fortune. None of those things should be the desire of our hearts. As a matter of fact, he continues that thought in verse 4. Labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom. Now, some would translate this more from that labor concept of don't overwork. Don't be a workaholic, as we sometimes call it today, just to get rich. Don't labor, don't put forth that effort just to gain riches. He says, cease from thine own wisdom. Your own wisdom is directing you and causing us to think that this is what's best. This is what I need to be doing. He says, don't give in to that. It's wrong to be slothful. It's wrong to be lazy. And if a man will not work, neither should he eat. But it's just as wrong for us to overwork and overextend ourselves just to get ahead, financially speaking, in this world, just to have those things or have a little bit more than what we need. We're to labor so we can have to give to those who are in need, absolutely. And we're to work to provide for our own. If a man will not provide for his own, he's denied the faith. He's worse than an infidel. We understand those concepts. But you can be denying your family what they need if we're overworking and we're never there for them either. If we're allowing our work to become our idol, if we're allowing our work to pull us away from the Lord and from our worship, those are things that we need to consider. As you continue then, verse 5, wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. Eat not the bread of him that hath an evil eye, neither desire his dainty meats. So again, wilt thou set thine eyes? Will you focus? Will you put your attention totally on those things that are not going to bring you what they promise? They're going to fly away like an eagle flying away. The powerful eagle, how it can soar to great heights. That's the way the riches are. They're fleeting. You trust in those things and they'll go away. We need to trust in the Lord. Put your confidence in Him. He's never going to leave us. He's never going to forsake us. Hebrews 13, verse 5. But He says, are you going to really put your focus on that? You're going to set your eyes on those things? They make themselves wings. They fly away. When they're gone for good. Eat not, he says, eat thou not the bread of him that hath an evil eye. Now you might have that translation in a different, more modern translation may have it as a selfish eye, kind of the idea of a miser. He says, don't eat the bread of him that is like a miser, the him that hath a selfish eye. Neither desire thou his dainty meats. Don't desire to be like him. If you're eating with him, goes on in verse 7, it says, for as he thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eat and drink, says he to thee, but his heart is not with thee. He's putting on the show, so to say, and eat, here, drink. I'm welcoming you in, but his heart's not with you. His heart's as he thinks in his heart. That's how he really is. And what he's thinking is, you're taking this away from me. I don't want to lose this. I don't want you to have this. This is mine. It's a selfish mindset. He says, verse 8, then the morsel which thou hast eaten shalt thou vomit up, and lose thy sweet words. It's not what it pretends to be. He's really a miser who can't stand letting go of these things. He always says the right things in the moment, but his heart's not with it. And just as you and I, we all are this way. As we think in our hearts, that's the way we really are. If we're selfish in our hearts, our words really don't mean what they say. If we're good in our hearts, our words do mean what they say. As a man thinks in his heart, that's the way he really is. So get your heart right. It's the old cliche, if you will. Who are you? You are the person you are when no one else is looking. That's the person you are within, the person you are on the inside. And so in the end, when you maybe eat that meat, it's kind of like one author I was reading was talking about. It's like eating and having a hair stuck in your throat. It causes a gag reflex. And though it may seem like this is a good meal and you're having this wonderful time with the dainties, the delicacies that he's put before you and he's telling you to eat, in the end, it's just going to make you sick. It's not going to produce what it appears to be. Then he says in verse 9, speak not in the ears of a fool, for he will despise the wisdom of thy words. The hearing, the understanding. Don't cast your pearls before swine. Matthew 7, verse 6. They'll turn and rend you, Jesus would say. The idea here is implying a person of wisdom, trying to impart that wisdom to a fool. Trying to impart that wisdom to someone whose ear is closed to it, someone whose heart is waxed gross. He will despise the wisdom of your words. You're wasting your time is what he's saying in essence. Verse 10, remove not the old landmark and enter not into the field of the fatherless. We talked about this in a previous episode. In the last chapter, in chapter 22, he mentions the same idea of the landmarks. It was usually a land marker. It was your property line. He says again, remove not that old landmark. Don't transgress, don't trespass, if you will, Enter not into the field of the fatherless. And God's taking care of those who are orphaned, those who are fatherless. They might not have the means wherewith to protect their land or to harvest all of their land. So don't go stealing and trespassing on their land. Why? Look at verse 11. For their Redeemer is mighty. He shall plead their cause with thee. It reminds me, when I think about that Redeemer concept, of what Job said. You remember Job was being very oppressed, and he was having difficulties he lost his children, he lost his wealth, he lost his health. His friends were calling him a sinner. You get over to chapter 19 of Job, in verse 25. Job came to a realization, he came to a statement that is so profound. He says, I know that my Redeemer lives and will set foot on this earth one day. He knew in whom he trusted. He knew in whom he believed, that he was able to keep that which he had committed unto him against that day. As Paul would say as well, he had confidence in his Redeemer. And he's telling us here, if you trespass, if you take advantage of those orphaned and removing their landmarks, trespassing on their land, stealing from them, their Redeemer will plead their cause. Their Redeemer is mighty, and he will plead their cause with thee. Then verse 12, apply thine heart unto instruction, and thine ears unto the words of knowledge. Apply it's a responsibility that's put upon us. It's an emphatic statement that you must do this, that it teaches us the importance of the education, biblical and spiritual education, that we all need to be growing in that. And when we get the heart and the ears working together, great good can come about from that. See, you can hear things if your heart's not with it. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. You can have the heart right, but if you're not hearing, you don't have the instruction that you need. So incline your ear, point your ear, focus, apply thine heart to instruction, and thine ears to the knowledge that God is sending us in his word. And if we do that, we can live a life that glorifies him. We're living a discerning life. We're making sure that we're not getting caught up in the temptations, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eye, the pride of life. We're seeing them for what they are, just as Jesus did when he was tempted by the devil. Lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life, all of those things, lust of the flesh, lust of the eye, the pride of life. He was tempted in all three of those areas. And what did he do every time? It is written. We can do that as well. And he's encouraging us to do that, to not get caught up in those pleasures of this world and temptations of this world, not to get overworked in this, trying to just get financial gain in this world, but doing what God created us to do, to fear him and keep his commandments. This is the whole of man. And one day, living with him for all eternity, as we hear him say those sweet words, well done, good and faithful servant. That's something on which we can meditate this Monday and every day. May God bless you till we meet again.